Welcome back, everybody. You know that steak you've been craving? Well, go ahead and have it. You know, protein is an important component to a healthy diet. And here to explain why is registered dietitian Sarah Jane Bedwell. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Tuwanda.
I always love having you because I learned so much from you. You're just a wealth of information.
Well, thank you.
So I'm glad we're here to talk about protein today because everywhere we read, everything we hear, they talk about these high protein diets, why we should be eating more protein. What exactly is protein and why is it so important that we include it in our diets?
Well, protein is one of the 3 major nutrients that we need in our diet to keep our bodies healthy and strong. So the other 2 are fat and carbohydrate.
Okay.
But protein is especially important. It's made up of what we call amino acids, which are basically the building blocks of every cell in our bodies. So protein is actually the 2nd most abundant source of material in our bodies other than water.
Okay.
So it's very important to our whole function and health.
Exactly. And I think I, in some ways, know that. I don't eat a lot of meat, but every time we think of protein, I think we think of meat, and that is so not the case. There are many other foods that are good sources of protein.
There really are, and I mean, of course, we do think of meat because it tends to have one of the highest contents of protein. So a 3-ounce serving of beef like I have here would provide about 25 grams of protein. So it is a great source, but we also have to remember there's fish, there's poultry, there's dairy products like cheese and low-fat yogurt, low-fat milk, great sources of protein. A 8-ounce glass of milk has 8 grams of protein, so a gram per ounce, really high in protein. Eggs are considered a gold standard of protein. They have about 7 grams in 1 large egg.
Okay.
So a great source. And then other plant sources of protein as well. So you have things like beans, you have things like lentils here, which are a legume, and legumes and soy and quinoa, which I have here, are actually all what we call complete proteins, meaning they have the 9 essential amino acids that our body has to get from food.
I've been hearing so much about this quinoa here, and I do love the taste of it, but I guess I didn't understand quite how it is so high in protein.
Yes.
It seems like it's a pasta or a grain, and so often we're trying to stay away from those things because they're so high in carbohydrates. But it's a protein. It's
a protein as well. It is a carbohydrate, but it's actually a seed. We think of it a lot of times as a grain, but it's actually a seed.
Okay.
And so, you know, nuts and seeds are good sources of protein, so quinoa as a seed is also a good source of protein. So it's a great, you know, maybe substitute for rice in some of your dishes.
Okay, then.
I like to use it as a base for salad, too, sometimes.
Oh, yeah, and then put some other veggies and things like that in it?
Yes, exactly.
I'll have to try that sometimes. So how much protein, then, do we need, Sarah Jane? Does that depend on our age, our weight? How much protein does each individual person need?
Well, it's different for everybody because it does vary based on all of those things, and of course how active you are. That will affect it as well. But a good place to start is take your body weight and divide it in half, and that's the number of grams of protein you should shoot for each day. You may need a little more than that if you're super active, but that's a good rule of thumb for the average person. So if someone weighs 160 pounds, they would need about 80 grams of protein per day.
Okay, well, does it matter when we eat that protein?
It does, because we can only absorb and use about 30 grams of protein at any given time.
Okay, so even though we might have our 60 grams, we can only absorb so much at a time.
Exactly, and if you eat more than that, we don't have a place to store it. Our bodies have a place to store carbohydrates in our liver. We call that our glycogen stores. But protein, the only way it's going to be stored is as fat if we eat too much of it.
We don't want that.
So just aiming for no more than 30 grams at a time and spreading that out throughout the day is really important as well.
What would a good breakfast be, and lunch and dinner? If you're trying to, say, have those 60 grams of protein, what are your thoughts on the egg yolks? What are your thoughts on what a good protein high breakfast would be?
Yes, well, I'm really glad you brought that up because that's really important, because that's the time that most people don't get enough protein. So we don't start our day off with very much protein. We might have just like maybe a cereal with a little bit of milk, but we don't have much protein. And then we have a lot of protein at dinner, but guess what? We can only use 30 grams at a time. So we're really not getting the amount of protein we need throughout the day. Plus, we're less hungry if we eat more protein in the morning because it is slower to digest than, say, like carbohydrates, and so it will keep us fuller throughout the day. So a good example of a high protein breakfast might be an omelet made with 2 whole eggs and 1 egg white and a little cheese, lots of veggies. That would be a super protein packed breakfast. I do like including the yolks because they do have important nutrients. They have something called lutein, which is an antioxidant that's good for our eyes, and other vitamins and minerals. But then the white is actually where the protein's found. So by combining a couple whole eggs with egg white, you're still getting plenty of protein, but reducing the fat just a little bit.
Okay, well that's good to know.
Yes.
What seems to be the biggest mistake, Sarah Jane, people make when it comes to protein?
Well, I think that's the very thing, is just not spreading it throughout the day, not getting enough at breakfast, getting hungry throughout the day, and eating a lot at dinner when our bodies really can't even use all of it at one time. And so spreading it throughout the day, having about even amount after each meal, and then also after exercise, having something with protein, especially if you're exercising for an hour or more or it's very intense. Protein is really important because protein helps to build and rebuild muscle. So if you don't have protein after you work out really intensely, then your body's going to break down its muscle rather than rebuild it. So it's really important to have that protein, and studies show that combining exercise with a diet rich in protein makes exercise more effective.
Okay.
So why not?
Well, why not? Is that too why, Sarah Jane, so often it's recommended that you have a protein shake or a protein bar shortly after you exercise?
Exactly. That is why you hear that recommendation, because protein is a major component of muscle. And so if we want to build that muscle, that protein is important. But I like to, stick to just traditional sources of protein rather than doing the protein powders and things like that. Those tend to be very expensive. And, really you can get just as good protein sources from some of the foods that we've been talking about.
That's great to know. So let's talk about some other great protein-packed meal ideas that you can give us. You gave a great one for breakfast because, an omelet packed with all kinds of good veggies. That sounds great. What about some ideas for lunch and dinner and maybe a snack?
Yes. So for a snack, doing a smoothie would be a great option.
Okay.
You could use some low-fat Greek yogurt, which is higher in protein than regular yogurt. You could blend that with some low-fat milk and maybe some frozen berries to add some flavor and color. That would be a super easy 3-ingredient smoothie you can make, great for kids after school or after your workout. It would be a great option because it would be hydrating as well. For lunch, a lot of times I like to make a big batch of the quinoa at the beginning of the week and then just make a cold salad out of it, like kind of thinking of it as if you would do a pasta salad. So you could put in other veggies, maybe some cheese. Sometimes I like to do it Southwestern style, top it with some black beans. That gives it even more protein. Little salsa, little avocado. That's a nice meatless meal.
Okay.
Eggs are a great option for lunch as well. You could do hard boiled. Again, boil them at the beginning of the week, and then you've got them on the go. And then for dinner, if you're dining out at a restaurant, you can get that sirloin steak. It's a lean cut of beef. And if you get the petite sirloin, that's going to be a smaller portion. And as you heard, we don't need a whole lot to get a lot of protein. 3 ounces provides 25 grams of protein. So that's quite a bit. And pair that maybe with a sweet potato and some green vegetable of some sort, broccoli or green beans. That would be a great balanced meal.
Those all sound fantastic. What I guess one of my questions too is, you mentioned the yogurt there. You hear so much these days about Greek yogurt.
Yes.
And then so when I'm weighing my options between regular yogurt and Greek yogurt, what is your thoughts? Why should we choose the Greek yogurt?
Well, the Greek yogurt is higher in protein. I also think it has a creamier taste to it because it's thickened. Basically, some of the excess water has been strained out from plain yogurt. That's why plain yogurt's thinner and Greek yogurt's thicker. And so I think I like just the flavor and the mouthfeel, but it also is higher in protein, so that's a good benefit as well. One thing I will say is, when you open your yogurt, whether it's plain or Greek, the liquid that's on top, don't pour that off. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's where some of the protein is. That's some of the whey. So stir that back in, and you won't even notice, but you'll be getting more of your protein that way.
So do you recommend the plain Greek yogurt? Because sometimes you get it with a lot of the little fruit on the bottom, and yogurt with granola and all kinds of things like that. That's packing in, I know, sort of extra calories. calories.
Right, that's a lot of added sugar. So what I would recommend is, yes, getting either a low-fat version or a plain version would be a really great option, and mixing in your own flavors. So your own berries, for instance, or maybe just a little small drizzle of honey. And, you know, that way you're staying away from some of those added sugars. Because milk naturally contains sugar, but that's naturally occurring sugar, which our bodies react differently to than the added sugars.
Gotcha. I know that dairy is great as far as protein goes, and you recommend the low-fat version of it. For those people who have problems perhaps with low fat, and rather than not drink milk at all, do you think it's okay to have like a little glass of milk?
Yes, I do. I think, you know, really watching your portions is important. And maybe if you are, you know, at your whole milk level, maybe gradually trying to come down a little. So come down to the 2%. You're still having less, you know, saturated fat, which is the kind of fat that's not as good for our hearts. So even if you're just making a small change, you don't have to go all the way from whole milk to fat-free overnight, you know?
Okay. Sarah J, we always get lots of great information from you. Thank you so much.
Thank
you got
you.
a book, great website that, of course, folks can go to for more information.
Yes, SarahJaneBedwell.com.
Great. Thank you for being here. I also want to thank my earlier guests, Lisa Mitchell and Debbie Mankin from Read to Succeed. And thank you for watching. I'm Tuwanda Coleman. I'll see you on the next Plus Side of Nashville.